In this video, we will be going over a chess game played by one of my coaching students, and he made a very big opening error. And it surprised me to see in the database that hundreds of thousands of players have made this mistake before. So with this video, I will try to warn you so you never make this mistake. My student was playing as black against the Zukertort opening, knight to f3, and he played pawn to d5, which is a great move because white is not fighting for the center with their first move. So what we do as black is we do try to grab hold of a central square by playing pawn to d5. And then white played g3. And the moment that white plays g3 here, it should be obvious that white is going to try to put a bishop on this diagonal. Okay, and this means that white is going to try to get a very strong bishop on that diagonal. So what we don't want to do is what happened in the game, and that is that black plays knight to c6. And the game is not completely over from there. You can still try to save it, of course, but the move itself is actually a mistake, and we are going to see why. This move has been played more than 3 million times by black, and it's not a good move. Why not? Well, we are going to see. In the game, white continued with d4, trying to also control the center. Black develops normally, knight f6, and the opponent plays bishop to g2, putting the bishop on that diagonal. And here, actually almost 1 million games continued with black making another huge mistake, which is bishop to g4. And this is basically already almost just a completely losing game for black. And the reason why is simply that there is so much going on with this diagonal. This pawn might be weak, this knight might be weak, and this pawn on b7, now that we move to bishop, might also be weak. And white has an incredible move here, knight to e5. And knight to e5 attacks the bishop, and it also attacks the knight. And it's not really easy to solve this for black. Black pretty much wasted the move. One of the best things you could do is probably just go back and admit that you made a mistake, but then white can continue attacking, and it's still very difficult because as black, you need to try to hold on to your center pawn, but it's not going to be easy because even if you protect it, they will attack it again, and yeah, there's not so much that we can do, and white just has a lot of pressure. But instead, what most players with black do is they take the knight. The pawn ends up recapturing, meaning that we need to move the knight back, but there is actually not a single good square for the knight. Knight g8 and knight d7 are both terrible squares. d7 is probably the best of the two, but it ends up with white just grabbing a free pawn in the center, protecting this, also attacking on this diagonal. And black can still try to do something, but pretty much white is just up a central pawn. Luckily, my coaching student, he didn't play bishop to g4. Instead, he played bishop to f5, which is already a little bit better, but he still got into trouble, all because of playing that very early move, knight to c6. And what white's going to do here is white is going to play pawn to c4, which is an interesting choice, because it looks like this is just a free pawn, and it actually is just a free pawn. But white is going to get a lot of compensation if we take this pawn. And also, of course, if we take the pawn, we are opening up that diagonal for the bishop, which is really not something that we want to do. My student, he didn't take, he played pawn to e6, strengthening the center. The opponent castled, and then the student decided, okay, let's take the pawn on c4, which I think it's not the best move, especially since we are helping them to open up their best piece. It doesn't lose the game immediately, but it could lead to trouble. For example, the move queen to a4 is already a very good move for white. You attack the pawn, you pin the knight to the king. We are still 2 moves away from castling, and the moment that this bishop opens up, then black is going to be in trouble. And the most played move here is a huge mistake. My student also played it, and that is bishop to d6. And we are going to have a look at why this is a mistake. A better thing to do would be to try to play queen d7 to unpin the knight, and then we just lose back the pawn. White has some attack, white has some counterplay, but black can still try to hold on, but it's going to be difficult. Bishop to d6, and this instantly gets a losing position. Why? White to play. White has the move knight to e5, and knight to e5 is just simply adding a second attacker to the already pinned knight, plus this is also taking away that very important square where we could potentially try to block with the queen. And the interesting thing is, you might think, well, wait a minute, if you play this, don't they still have knight e5? And that would actually be a huge blunder by white, because you could take the knight, backwards protect your queen, so in case they take, we just go back and we won a piece. And in case they take the knight, well, we take a queen. So that knight e5 move was not possible in the beginning, but after bishop d6, knight e5 is possible. And it's a lot of trouble for black. There's pretty much nothing that we can do to keep a good position, all because of that move, that knight c6 move in the beginning of the game. I would probably try to take the knight. I mean, we are eliminating one of the attackers, but then white takes, we take back, and white has multiple ways to get a winning position. They could just take the bishop, also attack the knight, and black has the dreaded pawn structure that you never want to have. Tripled pawns, plus the queen can take it with a check. Or white could also just take that first with the queen and give a check, and then later capture the bishop. So a lot of winning moves, and I think here, okay, it's already losing for black. The student just said, let's castle, let's get the king out of the way, and see if I can still try to fight my way back into the game, because of course they are going to take, they are going to win a pawn, but at the end of the day, it's one pawn that we are down. After they will capture back this eventually, because now it's actually equal material, but we can still try to fight, but pretty much the game is already almost over. But I will still be sharing some other interesting moments from this game, because even though we are done with the opening here, there were some mistakes in the middle game as well, which I'm pretty sure most people would make as well, especially beginner players here. So yeah, white just played rook b8. Okay, it's not a bad move, because if we play any other move, there is actually a tactic there for white. White can play queen takes rook, queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, rook takes bishop, and basically they gain the queen and a rook in exchange for a queen and a bishop. So they are trading, they are gaining material, and they were already at material. So to avoid this, rook b8 was played, which is a good move. I mean, it's the best move. We avoid those problems, but as you can see, we are going to lose c4 as well, and it's not that great. Rook b6 attacks the queen, queen a4, and then the student played queen to b8, which looks logical, because this queen just started attacking a weak pawn, so we can protect it. But there is a huge mistake. And if you want, you can pause and see if you can find. There are two winning moves for white. So the first winning move is very simple. The first winning move, it's not the best one, it's just knight takes c4, and that is what happened in the game. But there is actually a very simple tactic that white can play, which is very common, and beginners miss this all of the time. And that is that these two pieces are separated only by one pawn, and that means that these could potentially end up being forked if a pawn ever ends up on the e5 square. And here there is a move for white, pawn e4, which is achieving pawn e5, with also an in-between attack on the bishop, basically gaining a tempo, and then just simply pawn e5, and that wins material. But here in the game, white decided to go for the option knight takes c4, which is also winning, taking back a pawn, attacking the rook, and things are getting very complicated. Rook to b4 attacks the queen, queen to a6 saves the queen, and then here, the final mistake, I think, that really just put the nail in the coffin. But pretty much the game was already over. The game was just almost unwinnable from the beginning, from that move knight c6, and I will show you what to do instead. Here, the final mistake was knight to d5, which just ends up leading to pawn e4. And pawn e4, of course, is just that simple fork that we saw before that is now possible. What else could black do? Honestly, not much. Not much. You could say like, well, maybe I will try to move my bishop, but we are already down material, we are being attacked. Yeah, black is not going to win anyways. So all of this basically happened because very early in the game, knight c6 was played. A bad move. And this is a bad move for two reasons, and this is really something that you should remember. First of all, you never want to play knight c6 against a player who is going to do a fianchetto. That's just a rule that you need to remember. The second thing is that in general, you should never put a knight in front of the c-pawn. You should try to move the c-pawn first. I will actually show a move there, for example, c5. Then they play this. and then you could be thinking about a move like knight c6. And in general, this is always the better setup, because your pawn is controlling the center and your knight is behind it and also supporting the same squares as the pawn. But with the knight in front of the pawn, as happened in the game, this pawn is immobile, meaning it cannot move, and this knight is easily pinned, and then we have troubles. Another thing you could do is just not put the knight on c6 at all, and instead at some point, let's say we play knight f6, bishop g2, at some point maybe play c6. And this is a very interesting way how you can try to restrict an opponent's bishop, which is by building a pawn chain towards the bishop. So basically the bishop doesn't have that much power, and from here you can play a very simple middle game. So please never play this mistake, never play the move knight to c6. That is the big lesson from this game. If you also want to become my coaching student, you should go to pegasuschess.com, or you can also click the top link in the video description.